All right, people. So welcome to Jumbo IAS and welcome to UPSC Prelims Phoenix batch. Now, today is day 3 for economics current affairs. You all are familiar with the schedule. You all know what we do. We cover static as well as current affairs portion. Now, in the static portion, geography lectures are going on. And as far as current affairs are concerned, we are continuing with economics. Now, today is day 3 and today's topics from which we will cover MCQs are financial markets, fiscal policy, and payment systems. Okay, the notes for these are provided to you in advance. So I'm hoping that you are all done with the notes. Along with these topics, well, there is economic survey chapter 2 as well, which was added late. That is why we are recording this lecture a little late. You are receiving this lecture late. Okay, so that because I actually wanted to give you some time so that you revise everything. I really want that notes should be covered properly and then we discuss these MCQs. All right then. I hope while you're watching this, all the notes are thoroughly revised. Now let's straight away dive into the lecture. Okay. So current affairs, economics day 3, and these are our topics: financial markets, fiscal policy, and payment systems. Along with this, economic survey chapter 2, which was related to fiscal policy only. Okay, fiscal management. So these are our topics. So let's start discussing them through a set of MCQs. Okay, so let's straight away dive into this. Question number 1. With reference to Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act, consider the following statements. The Act legally mandates the government to reduce deficits to ensure intergenerational equity. The NK Singh Committee recommended a debt to GDP ratio of 60% as primary anchor for fiscal policy. The escape clause under Section 4.2 of the Act allows a deviation from fiscal deficit target only during national security threats or war. Now, FRBM Act basically tells you to reduce your fiscal deficit because today, if your fiscal deficit is high, that means you'll have to borrow a lot of money. If debt on you would be high, then the burden of servicing that debt, paying off that debt, would lie on future generations. So you are basically sacrificing future generations for your today's developmental needs. Now, this is against the principle of intergenerational equity. So FRBM Act was launched so that intergenerational equity is also established. Okay, so this is correct. Then, though Fiscal Deficit Act, FRBM Act basically gives you certain targets for fiscal deficit. For example, fiscal deficit should be 3% of GDP, revenue deficit should be 0%, primary deficit should be this much, okay? But there was this committee that was established in 2016 to review FRBM Act. And this committee advised that instead of targeting fiscal deficit, your primary target should be debt to GDP ratio. And your debt to GDP ratio should be 60% of GDP. I mean, debt to GDP ratio on center as well as state government should be less than 60%. That was the advice given by NK Singh Committee. This is also correct. Now, generally, you have to reduce your fiscal deficit, reduce debt. But on certain exceptional circumstances, you can exceed your fiscal deficit target or postpone your achievement of fiscal deficit target. And that happens through escape clause within FRBM Act. Now, escape clause can be triggered during war, national security threat, economical collapse, and many other reasons are given for triggering escape clause. So it's not just, the only word over here is problematic. Okay, so because of that, this statement is false. The answer would come out to be A. Right? Let's move forward. Consider the following documents presented along with annual financial statement, which is the budget. Okay, macroeconomic framework statement, medium-term fiscal policy statement, fiscal policy strategy statement. Now, FRBM Act says, remember this, FRBM Act says that you have to reduce your fiscal deficit. Along with that, every year while you present the budget, you have to present these 3 documents. This is mandated by FRBM Act. Okay, now what are these 3 documents? Macroeconomic framework statement, which gives you an overview of India's macroeconomic position. Medium-term fiscal policy statement. Medium term over here means next 3 years. In next 3 years, what would be your fiscal deficit target? So for example, government specifies that this year we are going to keep our fiscal deficit at 4%. Then next year we'll reduce it to 3.5. And then next year we'll reduce it to 3%. So in this document, government gives a 3-year rolling targets for fiscal deficit. Okay, and then is fiscal policy strategy statement. How would government achieve these targets? So these three documents have to be presented during budget, along with budget. This is mandated by FRBM Act. So all three documents, the answer would come out to be D. All right, next. Regarding quality of deficit mentioned in this year's budget projections, which of the following best describes the government strategy? Now remember this. Government knows this fact that fiscal deficit is a reality, will always be there. Okay, we can only reduce it, but we cannot eliminate it completely. It cannot be 0% of GDP. There will be fiscal deficit, which means that government's expenditures would be more than its receipts. Now, how would government compensate for this extra expenditure? Okay, you're spending more money, earning less. So where is this extra money coming from? Government borrows. Okay, but the thing is that this borrowing should be utilized towards useful, beneficial expenditure rather than wasteful, non-essential expenditure. This is basically showcased through quality of deficit. That you are borrowing money to fulfill this deficit, but what is the quality of your expenditure, extra expenditure? Where are your borrowings going? So there are two kinds of expenditure. Revenue expenditure, which is generally considered non-essential, wasteful, and capital expenditure, which is generally considered useful, because capital expenditure is kind of investment. It gives you returns in future. So your quality of deficit would be high if you are spending, if your deficit is more because of capital expenditure rather than revenue expenditure. Okay, so your borrowings should be channelized towards capital expenditure more than revenue expenditure. This is also known as golden rule of public finance. Golden rule, that your borrowings should be more towards capital expenditure. Okay, so prioritizing borrowing for capex to create productive assets over consumption. Consumption means revenue expenditure. So the answer would come out to be B. This is what we mean by quality of deficit. And government has improved its quality of deficit as showcased by this year's budget. All right, next. With reference to Income Tax Act, this was a big law which overhauled the income tax structure. Consider the following statements. It eliminates the dual year system by introducing a single tax year starting April 1st. The three-tier residency status, ROR, RNOR, I'll tell you, NR has been simplified into two-tier system, resident or non-resident. Okay. The time limit to file updated returns has been reduced from 4 years to 2 years to ensure faster compliance. Okay. Now, this new law has overhauled the entire taxation structure. Earlier, what used to happen was we used to follow assessment year approach, which means that from 1st April 2025, just a second, yeah, 2025 to 31st March 2026, this financial year, the income tax for this financial year would be paid in next financial year. Okay, this was the case. But now government has introduced a new system in which the income tax for this financial year can be paid in that financial year. Okay, so this has been changed. So this dual year system, that for previous year's income, you will pay income tax in next year, that has been removed to simplify certain things. So this is correct. Now, you know, income tax for NRIs, non-resident Indians, there are different systems for that. But we have basically complicated the system. Okay, we classify residents into various categories. Okay, RONR, resident, ordinarily resident. Okay, this is the system. Who is an ordinary resident in India? Then resident, but not an ordinary resident. Basically, he is a resident of India, but currently is not living in India, RNOR. And then there are NRIs, NR. Okay, now the government has simplified because these two categories were creating a lot of confusion. There are different ways. So for example, if in 1 year, for more than 6 months you stay in India, you are in this category. If not even for 6 months, then in this category. And NRIs are NRIs. There were various qualifications. That has been done away with. Now there are two categories, resident and non-resident. NRI and non-NRI. So this is also correct. Now the time limit to file updated returns has been increased to 2 to 4 years, so that people are given more time, not reduced. So this is false. The answer would come out to be A. Okay, next. In the context of transfer pricing in India, what is the primary difference between safe harbor rules and advanced pricing agreements? Okay. Now, transfer pricing in India. Now, transfer pricing is basically, look, foreign investors come to India, okay, and sometimes they accuse that income tax department harasses them, increases their tax burden, reduces it, and all that stuff happens. So there are few way outs. One is safe harbor rules. If you register under safe harbor rules, you will have a predictive, there are government rules for deciding tax rates on you. So it reduces unpredictability. Advanced pricing agreement is also a similar thing, but in that the government and the private MNC have a contract and they decide what would be the methodology for this. Okay, so this is more informal, this is more formal. So SHR involves negotiations? No, it is a direct rule. SHR is automated, non-discretionary process for routine services, while APAs are negotiated contracts. Okay, so this is correct. The answer would come out to be C. All right, next. Regarding securities transaction tax hikes, what is the stated rationale for the finance ministry? Now, you should know what is security transaction tax. We have discussed this in fiscal policy. Well, these are taxes levied on all transactions. When you buy and sell shares in the stock market or bonds in the stock market, well, STT is levied. Now, recently, government has increased STT. Why? Because there were a lot of speculative trading, a lot of risky trading happening. Okay, and government wanted to reduce that. So this was the reason. To curb speculative trading on future and options, yes. To encourage retail investors to move towards high frequency algorithmic trading, that means trading through bots, robots, or program software. Government wants to discourage that. Okay, and government also wants to increase its tax revenues to align the financial sector's tax contribution with growth in market turnover. Yes. So 1 and 3. All right, next. Which of the following items are currently outside GST net? So remember this, currently tax on petroleum, tax on alcohol, which is still with state governments, and tax on electricity because it is a sensitive matter. These three are outside the purview of GST. See this, this and this. Life and health insurance do attract GST. You all must have seen that also while paying premiums for this. So answer would come out to be 1, 3 and 4. Okay, next.